All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It is time for another deep dive. And this one is going to be a little bit spicy this time.
Oh, yeah.
You know why?
Always.
Because this is something that's on every UPSC aspirant's mind right now, right?
Right.
It's like one of those things that pops up in the mains exam every single time, and nobody can really ever get a good grasp on it.
It's one of those topics that can make or break you.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so this time we're going to try to break it down as best we can, the whole U.S. Fed rate cut thing and all of the craziness that's been going on in the market because of it,
Yeah, it's been wild the past couple weeks.
especially for India, right? Like we always seem to get caught in the crosshairs.
Well, that's because, we are a major player on the global stage now.
Right.
And so what happens in the U.S. definitely has ripple effects all over the world.
And we've been feeling those ripple effects big time.
Yeah, especially with the rupee hitting record lows against the dollar. I mean,
It's crazy.
have you seen the numbers lately? 85.13.
Yeah, it's enough to make you want to just like tear your hair out
Right.
if you're prepping for those exams right now.
Absolutely.
But okay, so let's try to break it down and make sense of all of this madness.
Right.
So first of all, what exactly did the Fed do? Because I feel like there's all this talk about a rate cut, but nobody really knows what that means.
Yeah, so basically, the Fed cut interest rates, which usually means things should get a little bit easier. Money should be cheaper to borrow, and businesses should be able to invest more and hopefully boost the economy.
Okay.
But the thing is,
There's a but.
there's always a but,
Right,
right?
yeah.
They didn't cut rates as much as everyone was expecting, and that's what kind of threw everyone off.
So it's like a half measure kind of thing?
Exactly. They're trying to walk this tightrope between stimulating growth and keeping inflation under control.
Oh, I see.
Because if they cut rates too much, inflation could spiral out of control. But if they don't cut enough, the economy might stall.
So they're kind of in a pickle then.
Yeah, they're trying to find that sweet spot.
And meanwhile, back in India, we're kind of holding our breath. Like, what does this mean for us?
Well, I mean, you saw what happened, right?
Yeah.
Rupee takes a nosedive. The markets are all jittery. Everyone's wondering what's going to happen next.
Like, what's the RBI going to do
Right, because they were probably thinking about cutting rates, too.
to help our economy?
Exactly. But now they have to worry about this whole rupee situation because if they cut rates, it might make the rupee fall even further.
And that makes everything more expensive, right?
Yeah, imports become more expensive.
Especially oil.
Yeah, which is not good for inflation at all.
That's kind of the last thing we need right now.
Absolutely. And that's the dilemma the RBI is facing right now. Do they prioritize growth or do they try to stabilize the rupee and keep inflation in check?
So it's like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in for sure.
It's a tough spot to be in, and it's definitely something that I think any UPSC aspirant should be paying close attention to, because this is the kind of stuff that comes up on those exams all the time. It's not just about, the textbook definitions of economics. It's about understanding how these global events can actually impact India.
Yeah, it's about being able to analyze those real-world scenarios and understanding the complex interplay of factors.
Right. And I think this situation with the Fed and the rupee is a perfect example of that. So let's dig in a little bit deeper and try to unpack this a little bit more, because there's a lot to unpack here.
Okay, let's do it. Yeah, so where do we even begin with unpacking this whole RBI situation?
I mean, I guess the first thing is what can they even do about this?
Right, what are their options?
Yeah, because on the one hand, it seems like they should probably hold off on cutting rates for now, right?
Yeah, that seems to be the most logical move, just to.
Keep things stable.
Yeah, exactly. Keep the rupee from falling further.
Right, and keep inflation under control, because we don't need that going crazy again.
No, definitely not.
But then on the other hand, if they don't cut rates, that means our economy might not grow as fast as it could.
Right, it's a trade-off, and it's not an easy one to make.
No, not at all. And yeah, it's easy to talk about all this stuff in the abstract, but what does it actually mean for people on the ground?
Right, what are the real-world implications of all this?
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're a small business owner who relies on imported materials,
Ooh, yeah.
and suddenly the rupee is weaker,
Your costs just went up.
significantly, right?
Yeah, and that cuts into your profit margins.
Big time.
Yeah, and it could even force you to raise prices.
Which then makes everything more expensive for everyone.
Exactly, it's a ripple effect.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, and this is the kind of stuff that UPSC examiners love to ask about, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're going to want you to be able to connect the dots between these global events and how they impact India.
Yeah, and not just in a theoretical sense, but with real-world examples.
Exactly. How does this affect businesses, consumers, the overall economy.
And it's not all bad news.
All right.
There's actually a flip side to this whole weaker rupee thing.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Because it makes our exports more competitive.
Right, because if the rupee is weaker, then our goods are cheaper for people buying them in other countries.
Exactly. So sectors like textiles, pharmaceuticals, IT services.
They might actually benefit from this.
Yeah, they could see a boost in demand.
So it's not all doom and gloom then.
No, it's a mixed bag. Some sectors win, some sectors lose.
Like a giant economic seesaw.
Yeah, constantly shifting with these global currents.
And that's why it's so important to understand these nuances, right?
Absolutely.
It's not enough to just know the definitions you have to be able to see the bigger picture and understand how all these different pieces fit together.
Yeah, and that's what the UPSC is really looking for in those answers.
It's not about memorizing facts. It's about critical thinking and analysis.
Exactly.
And I think this whole situation with the Fed and the rupee is a great case study for that.
Yeah, it really highlights how interconnected the global economy is.
And how events in one part of the world can have a ripple effect everywhere else.
And speaking of the RBI, they do have another tool in their arsenal that they could use to try and stabilize the rupee.
Oh, right. They could intervene in the currency market.
Exactly. They could buy up rupees using their foreign exchange reserves.
Which would hopefully prop up the value of the rupee.
Right, but it's a risky move.
Oh, how so?
Well, for one thing, it depletes those reserves, which are not unlimited.
Right, they can't just keep doing that forever.
No, and it might not even be effective in the long run.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if the underlying factors that are causing the rupee to fall are still there.
Like the Fed's rate cuts and stuff.
Yeah, then intervening in the market is just a temporary fix.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound.
Pretty much.
So it's not a simple solution.
No, not at all.
And you could see how this one decision by the Fed has created this whole chain reaction of challenges for the RBI.
And this is exactly the kind of analysis the UPSC is looking for, right?
They want you to be able to think critically about these situations and understand the complexities involved.
Right. Yeah, because it's not just about knowing what happened, it's about understanding why it happened and what the potential consequences could be.
Right, and that's what separates a good answer from a great one.
Absolutely. And it's the kind of thinking that will be valuable to you no matter what field you end up working in.
Whether you're in finance policy or anything else.
Exactly.
Because understanding these global economic forces is essential for navigating the challenges that India faces in the 21st century.
It's like a real-life economics exam playing out in the headlines.
And you got to be prepared to ace it.
Absolutely.
All right, so we've talked about all this stuff with the Fed and the rupee and like what the RBI might do, but
Yeah.
let's bring it back down to earth for a second.
Mm-hmm.
For all those UPSC aspirants out there who are listening,
Hmm.
what are the main things they should be taking away from all this?
Yeah, good point. I think the biggest thing is just realizing that, India is really part of this global economic web now. Whether we like it or not, what happens in, the US or Europe or even China, it all comes back to affect us here in India.
It's like that whole butterfly effect thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. One little thing can set off this whole chain reaction.
And I think this episode is a perfect example of that, right? Like the Fed cuts rates, investors get spooked, the rupee takes a hit, and suddenly the RBI has got this huge dilemma on their hands.
Yeah, and that's what you need to be able to explain on those exams.
Yeah.
Not just the what, but the why.
Right, exactly. Like, why did this happen? What does it mean for India in the long run?
What are the potential consequences for different sectors?
What about the political and social ramifications?
There's so much to unpack there.
Yeah, it's not just about memorizing a bunch of facts and figures. It's about being able to connect the dots and seeing the bigger picture.
And being able to articulate that in your answers.
Exactly, and that's what's going to set you apart from the rest.
Absolutely. And I'll just leave you with this one final thought.
Okay.
As India tries to become this global economic superpower, how do we balance the benefits of globalization with the risks?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right, because we want to be part of the global economy, but we also don't want to be completely at the mercy of these external shocks.
It's a tough balance to strike.
Yeah, and it's something that policymakers are struggling with right now.
And something the future civil servants are going to have to deal with, too.
So it's definitely something worth thinking about.
Food for thought, for sure. All right, so to wrap things up, guys, we've seen how this one little decision by the Fed can create all these huge ripple effects across the world.
Yeah.
We've talked about the challenges it creates for the RBI.
Mm-hmm.
And most importantly, we've highlighted why understanding all this is crucial for anyone who wants to crack the UPSC exam.
Definitely.
It's not easy, but we're here to help you every step of the way.
That's right.
So make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the deep dive for more awesome deep dives like this one.
And don't forget to share it with all your friends who are also prepping for those exams.
Right, because we're all in this together. All right, guys, until next time, happy studying.